Welcome to the opening line report here on Vegas Insider. Kevin Rogers with you. Week 14 is already here, and we're ready to talk about the opening numbers. Patrick Everson is going to join us coming up in just a moment. Patrick covers all the lines, all the movements, everything. He's based in Las Vegas, does a great job covering the college football scene, the NFL scene. We know who our college football playoff is now, the Final Four. Georgia is going to face Ohio State in Atlanta, and you also have Michigan and TCU hooking up in the Fiesta Bowl. So those numbers have come out. What kind of movement has there been? And then, of course, we get to the NFL. Week 14 kicks off Thursday with the Raiders and the Rams in L.A., the two former L.A. teams. I mean, Rams are still there. Raiders left L.A. a long time ago. Now they're in Las Vegas. They've been playing well of late. Rams have been terrible. But we'll look at all the games coming up inside of the NFL. It's not really all of them, but the key games. So let's bring Patrick on now. Patrick Everson, of course, Vegas Insider. You can find him on Twitter at @PatrickE_Vegas. Patrick, it's good to see you again. And obviously very busy weekend for you, as always. And the college football playoff has been announced. We have our two matchups. No Alabama. Sorry, Nick, you're out. But what kind of movement with the games? Let's begin with Georgia. They're taking on Ohio State, and the Buckeyes sneak into the top four. Georgia undefeated after winning the SEC. Georgia slightly below a touchdown favorite, but what have you heard with this Georgia-Ohio State game out of the gate?
Right, and you're right about Alabama too. I took a flyer on them last week at 25-1, just in case there was enough chaos this past weekend. So that ticket is dead, but I had a little fun with it. It certainly got interesting over the weekend. Yeah, this game, several spots opened at Georgia 7, a few opened 6.5. Among those was the Superbook, and I talked about this with John Murray on Sunday, and just double checked back before we jumped on live here today, Kevin. And they're still 6.5 at the Superbook. And he said coming out of the gate, like I said, the first couple of numbers that kind of popped up at Twitter and reports as those four teams were announced, as the matches were announced, was 7. And he just said, we'd like 6.5 more than 7. We just think the line at Georgia -7 is too high. They did see, in turn, out of the gate, he said, we've seen some people betting Georgia because we've got it at 6.5. He said, it's not our sharper players necessarily, just people see the market at 7 and lay the 6.5. But again, that hasn't moved at all off of 6.5 at the Superbook, still sitting 6.5 as we talked to all of you on Monday morning. The total up a point, though, to 61.5 on that game. A couple of reasonably high totals on both of those games.
Yeah, and Ohio State, they don't play in the Big Ten championship. They lose to Michigan in that final game of the year, Patrick, and they go from a 7.5-point favorite against Michigan. Now all of a sudden you see Ohio State in a rare underdog role. Mm-hmm. I mean, you got to go back to when Urban Meyer was there, when they had who was the quarterback that came in? Who was the third stringer, and they won all those games. They ended up beating Oregon in the national championship.
Right.
Cardale Jones. That's
yes.
right. This one
just
popped in my head there. But as an underdog, this is a rare spot for Ohio State. They kind of thought they were dead in the water, and now they're back. At least they have a little bit of a chance. Not saying that they're going to just beat Georgia outright, but at least now they know their season is a bit resuscitated.
Oh, I agree. I mean, they've got, a new lease on life and are sort of playing with house money. I think with the way you saw that Michigan game go down, and then some of the other hurdles that were going to have to be cleared, that Ohio State didn't seem that likely. And then all of a sudden, I thought what was really interesting, I mean, it sort of pointed to it last week, relatively early in the week, when you were looking at odds makers who had to win the national championship. Obviously, they had Georgia number 1. They had Michigan in the number 2 slot after the win over Ohio State. And then it was Ohio State. And then it was TCU, USC, et cetera. The Alabama. I think it was down basically 6 teams by last week. Most books weren't even going beyond 6 teams, and Alabama being the 6th. But Ohio State was listed ahead of TCU, either even with TCU or ahead of TCU, and also ahead of USC, almost as if the odds makers were like, look, if there's any chaos, we think there might be a little, an upset or two, or quasi upset or two this weekend. And that, Ohio State's chances of getting in are better if something unusual happens, and they were right. So if you got in on Ohio State last week to win it all, I believe you could have gotten like 11-1, something in that range. And now I know at BetMGM, I hadn't checked this morning yet, but at least yesterday it was obviously Georgia #1, Michigan #2, but Michigan and Ohio State were practically interchangeable at like 3-1 and plus 350. So, and then TCU 4th. There's only 4 teams left, and TCU is 16-1 to win it all. So, it speaks volumes, and hopefully, I would bet some people took some flyers. The way I did on Alabama last week, I probably should have done that on Ohio State too, because you would have gotten much longer number on Ohio State to win it all. And I totally think they're live, Kevin. I think it's like you said, they're playing with house money.
Looking at the other matchup, Patrick, Michigan and TCU, I guess the first question is, how surprised are you that TCU still remained in the top 4 after their overtime loss to Kansas State? I'm
not too surprised because first off, it was just a hell of a game to watch. Holy cow. And Max Duggan is unbelievable. That guy's just he's a war horse, man. But by the time that game got to kickoff, the number jumped the fence. Kansas State was actually favored in that game. TCU was right, literally an elbow touching down at the half-yard line or whatever away from potentially from winning that game. So I'm not super surprised. When it ended, I thought, you know what? Even though I was holding that Alabama ticket, it was kind of hopeful. I'm like, I don't think Alabama's getting in. I don't think they're gonna bump TCU out for playing a really, really good, playing really well in the Big 12 championship game. It's almost like they would have been penalizing them for making it to the championship game while Alabama was basically on a bye week. So, but we've seen strange things happen with these from time to time, and TCU certainly felt the brunt of that several years ago when they got left out and thought they should have been in. I think it was 2014. So, which I believe was the first year of the college football playoff. So, I wouldn't have been shocked if it happened, but I was pretty resigned to it not happening. And look, if Duggan could keep playing like he played against Kansas State and give us an entertaining game or maybe 2, I'm all right with that.
Now, what about Michigan, Patrick? They blew out Georgia last year in the Orange Bowl, or Georgia blew them out last year in the Orange Bowl, excuse me. And right. Now Michigan is favored in this spot with high expectations with Harbaugh. He already beat Ohio State another year, won the Big Ten championship for the first time last year. Now he's won it 2 straight years, but obviously the pressure on them. And Michigan goes to a favorite spot after being an underdog in this game last year. And TCU, I don't say feels like the Cincinnati of last year, but also they're not playing like an Alabama either. But what's the people's response to the Sharps' responses here in Michigan?
Right. Well, really not much at all. It was interesting. I went back and forth with John Murray at the Superbook a couple of times yesterday, right after the number came out, and then a couple of hours later, and kept kind of checked back in a couple of times over the course of the day. And right now at the Superbook, they are still sitting 9. And it wasn't like anybody jumped all over it to put them in a position where they're like, okay, there's an opinion here. We need to move on this. They haven't moved off it at all. They're still sitting 9, much the same way that Georgia's 6.5. Although at least in that Georgia one, there were 7s out there early on too, so people were laying the 6.5 with Georgia. But he said they wasn't any sort of kind of rush to the window to get on that one at all. But however, he did note that on the total, which opened at 59.5. that they did want to jump on that. He said, we saw sharp money on over 59.5 right away, and they went up 2 points in a hurry to 61.5. So actually both totals, interestingly, were at 61.5 for a period of time. Now, since then, later in the day, late last night when I checked back, the TCU Michigan total had actually fallen back to 60. So just a tick above the 59.5 opener. But he said out of the gate, they saw sharp money coming on over 59.5.
Let us transition to the NFL now, Patrick. And Thursday night, Raiders and Rams. And look, Vegas is playing better. They've won 3 in a row. They beat the Chargers on Sunday. And they're probably a little too far behind the pack to maybe make a wild card unless they go on a great run at the end. We know that LA has totally packed it in. And they have injuries all over the place. Stafford, Kupp, Aaron Donald's out. And Sean McVay just wants to wave the white flag on this season. The Rams covered on Sunday against Seattle. They actually hung around in that game. Now they're a home dog again against the Raiders, and Las Vegas laying 6 in this one. So the Raiders closed as a favorite against the Chargers after they opened as a dog. Now they're a hefty road favorite here, and they've struggled on the road this season, even though they have the 2 overtime wins recently. So what are you hearing here with the Raiders and the Rams?
Yeah, this is all off some information I got, excuse me, Sunday night from Casey Degnan, who's one of the senior risk supervisors over at the Superbook, and is pretty dialed in on the NFL. So in this game, there was, they thought about going even the Raiders a touch higher. There was discussion, I mean, based on, how they looked against the Chargers, and they've won 3 in a row now. Like you said, they're kind of trying to put something together after a 2-7 straight up start. But he said there was discussion at going 6.5 on Raiders. They ended up going 5.5. And as we look at the numbers this morning, the Superbook's still sitting at 5.5 on the Raiders. He said, Casey thinks this is going to go up. He said, I could see this getting higher as the week goes on, as people start to buy into the Raiders' resurgence a little bit more. Short week, he said, with this being Thursday Night Football, prime time game, he thinks it will write good action, even though the Raiders are probably out of it. And the Rams, like you said, have certainly packed it in for this season. They are cooked and done and served. They're over. But with the injuries and so forth. But he said with it being Thursday night, prime time, he still thinks it'll write pretty good action. He thinks both teams got a good West Coast following. The Raiders have a really good West Coast following. I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders have a lot more fans there in LA on Thursday night than the Rams do.
Yeah, it should be the case just because, not a far trip really from Vegas. And also I'm sure there's still a contingent of Raider fans in Southern California after all these years. But I can't remember, Patrick, a defending champion falling this hard, this fast. And yes, there's injuries. I get it. But LA has no good wins this year. I feel like the Buffalo game out of the gate, and people knew Buffalo, that they were going to be obviously a Super Bowl favorite. But I think that game kind of just marked this season for LA as being a total letdown, because from there hasn't been really a lot of close losses. They've just looked bad. And like you said, that the number can just jump on this because Vegas, when healthy, that's still a much better team right now than what LA is.
Oh, absolutely. When healthy, they're really good. Look, Devontae Adams had a great game yesterday. Josh Jacobs is just a stud. But when that team's totally healthy, it's absolutely a good team. And that's why, that was part of why, along with the Russell Wilson deal with Denver and where Justin Herbert is, and of course with Patrick Mahomes, why they thought that the AFC West was going to be the best division in football this year. It's not working out that way at all. And turns out the NFC East and the AFC East are, which we're going to talk about teams in both those divisions in a little bit here. That's where things are at this year. That's really where at least if you're going by record, that's where the best divisions of football are. But yeah, there's a ton of talent with the Raiders. So they're definitely a better team, I think, than their record. They blew that game early in the season against Arizona at home in overtime. They had that game in hand and let it get away from them, and they've had a couple of times, and some really bad turnovers here and there from Derek Carr that have really damaged them. But that's definitely a team that, like I said, is probably better than its record. And there's also certainly, now that they've won a couple in a row, now 3 in a row. I think some of the bandwagon, the local bias is coming back in with some of these books here in Vegas, where some of the Raider fans are getting back on board, and they certainly get on board for home games. Literally the stadium, if you can hit driver pretty well, you could probably hit a golf ball from Allegiant Stadium into the back wall of the sports book at Mandalay Bay. So it's they were probably really pretty well bet locally yesterday, and obviously got the job done. I know one book specifically told me that they took it pretty good on the Raiders getting the cover yesterday.
Let's shift over now to Sunday's action, Patrick. Jets and Bills in Buffalo, and the Bills nearly a 10-point favorite here at home, total of 44.5 at BetMGM. And this is a revenge spot for Buffalo. New York stunned them the first time around. Bills a little extra rest after they beat the Patriots. They play back-to-back Thursday games, so now they have the Sunday game at home. They haven't played a home game in a bit because the Detroit game, or the game against Cleveland, got moved to Detroit. So it's been a few weeks for them back at home. But also, you look at the Jets side. The Jets had so many opportunities on Sunday against Minnesota. They dug themselves that big hole, and you're like, you got to score one of these times. Patrick, you got to punch it in from inside the 5. They just couldn't do it. and they lose that game to Minnesota. They don't get the cover. Jets have still been a pretty competitive road team. But what have you heard here with the Bills? They've caught a little bit of fire of late. And this Jets team still hanging around the wild card, but they were dealt a tough loss on Sunday at Minnesota.
Yeah, no doubt. I was watching that game. I think the Jets should have won that game late. I think I can't believe it, or at least scored and forced Minnesota to have to score to win as well. Something should have happened on one of those last two possessions, and they just couldn't get it done. As you said, that would have been a pretty good win for the Jets against the team with the second best record in the NFL, which I'm still kind of just like, wow. Vikings have the second best record in the NFL. Just kind of, it floors me a little bit, but yeah. And as you said, as you alluded to, the Bills are picking up the pace a little bit, 9-3 now straight up. And what Casey said about this, they did open Bills 9.5. Nothing happened last night, although he did say Sunday night, he did say some smaller bets had come in on the Jets so far, but nothing that had forced them off the number at all. He did say as the week goes on, I anticipate seeing some action on Buffalo in all forms. He said, especially moneyline parlays. The Bills are going to be in those it's like the free bingo space every week is what people think. It hasn't worked out that way always with the Bills at 9-3, obviously. But he also says it's a little bit of a revenge spot. Remember, a few weeks back, the Bills lost to the Jets. He expects the book to be rooting for the sweep in this game. Now, this morning, that number did make a little bit of a new move. Perhaps off of seeing a little bit more action on the Jets. As Casey alluded to, they saw some Sunday night, but didn't move. This morning, they have gone down to Bills 9 at the Superbook.
All right, so down to 9. All right, and look, the Bills, you can make the argument for them at 9-3, and I know they snuck by the Lions on Thanksgiving, but the 3 losses, they lost by 2 to the Dolphins. They lost that Jet game and the Viking game, and they totally threw away at home when Josh Allen fumbled on his own one after they made that stop. So Buffalo, you could say they could be maybe 11-1, but still a pretty good team. And they'll have this game circled against the Jets coming up on Sunday. Meanwhile, the Eagles and the Giants, they meet at MetLife Stadium, and New York coming off the always thrilling tie against Washington on Sunday. They did cover, though, as short underdogs, but New York led in that game late. Washington tied, and then the Giants couldn't get the go-ahead score in overtime. So they get the tie. Now, Philadelphia, they dominated Tennessee, Patrick, on Sunday. Philadelphia keeps rolling right now. You just wonder if they can keep this up once the playoffs come around. But the Eagles just shy of a touchdown favorite here, total of 45.5 at MetLife Stadium.
Yeah, and actually up to a touchdown now at the Superbook. The Superbook didn't move at all on Sunday night. Casey said they opened 6.5, stuck there all evening. So the move to 7 came this morning here in Las Vegas with the Superbook, and obviously the Superbook operates in a handful of other states as well. So up to 7 on the Eagles today. But Casey still said tickets and money have been about split on the spread in the early going. Notes the Giants have performed well this year, but he said they are still get the sister kisser tie with Washington on in Sunday's action in the NFL Week 13. But he said New York is still power rated, at least by them, as the worst team in the NFC East. So he said it's no surprise that the Eagles are laying almost a touchdown on the road. Again, that comment was on Sunday evening when it was at 6.5. Now it's at 7. And he noted the Eagles are definitely a popular team, kind of alluding to what we just did a moment ago with the Buffalo Bills. They're a popular team to be tied to teasers and parlays. So he expects that type of action to definitely be on Philly. I think they'll be rooting for the Giants at home. Again, I believe the Giants were at home yesterday, if I recall. And so they're going to need the Giants at home in a situation where they're a little bit bigger dog than the Giants were against the Commanders. And the Giants covered yesterday against the Commanders, cover the number in a 20-20 tie.
And that game also finished under the total, right? It was 40.5. So, so you figure go to overtime. You got this, kick a field goal.
Exactly.
Team gets a couple possessions. You get 1, nothing. You got no points in overtime. You got nothing and you like it. And just too bad. And what's funny is, I don't know if you see this or not, Patrick, but the Commanders, kind of an odd scheduling quirk. They get the Giants back-to-back games because they're off this week. Then they get the Giants again after the bye.
Oh, I did not realize that until you said it. That is a really wild scheduling quirk. There's been a few of those this season where we've had teams cleaning up both of their division games very early in the season.
Yeah, Colts Titans had that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really weird. And now seeing basically, like you said, the Commanders playing them in back-to-back games with a bye in between. That's fascinating for sure.
Now let's look at one of the later games on Sunday, Buccaneers and the Niners. Now we are filming this on Monday, so we don't know what happened in the Saints-Buccaneers game. And obviously anything can happen to change the line. But as of now, we do know that Jimmy Garoppolo is not playing the rest of the year for San Francisco, broke his foot in Sunday's win against the Dolphins. So now it's the Brock Purdy party coming up the rest of the way, the former Iowa State Cyclone. And he threw a couple touchdown passes in San Francisco's win on Sunday. The defense is still fantastic. But the Niners, as of now, a 3-point favorite. Tampa Bay slopping their way to maybe first place in the NFC South. I mean, as of now. But what have you heard here? Obviously, things can change after Tampa Bay's game on Monday, but especially with the quarterback change from Garoppolo to Purdy.
Right, and San Francisco perhaps shopping around trying to see what other options they have, knowing that Garoppolo's not coming back this season. Obviously, they lost Trey Lance early in the season. And again, Casey Degnan at the Superbook said they were going to open this game higher, but obviously the Garoppolo news impacted that. So they landed on 49ers -3.5. And late, and rather off of that move, he said the Sharps came in on the Bucs right away, knocking them down to 3 pretty quickly on Sunday evening. He noted Purdy, as you noted, played a majority of the game. They got to see him a little bit, but he said it's different when you're the guy all week and taking the first team reps in practice. Obviously, it'll be a good test for him if he ends up under center on Sunday, which at least for the moment he will. But yeah, they went down a half a point on Sunday evening on the Niners, down to 3 in that game. No movement this morning, still sitting at 3 at the Superbook. The total was, I believe they opened the total 39 at the Superbook. They went down a full point to 38 pretty quickly after the number went up. And then later Sunday night, down another tick to 37.5. And that's where it's sitting right now, man. That is a lean total, but you get it with the way some of these scores have been, and now the Niners having to go to a third string quarterback. But that is a tidy total, and it's down 1.5 in basically a few hours.
And also, we know, Patrick, how good defensively Tampa Bay is.
You got
their running game stinks, but how good their defense is. San Francisco's defense has been unbelievable, and to see what Purdy can do, he has got the weapons around him. It's just about, can he move the ball against Tampa Bay? So it should be interesting coming up there on Sunday afternoon. Now going to Southern California Sunday night, this Dolphins-Chargers game that got flexed to the Sunday night game. Herbert hooking up, and the Dolphins staying out west. They're laying 3 here, and the Chargers, home dog. We've seen them as a dog a few times this year. They lost outright to the Chiefs a few weeks ago. They lost that Sunday night game in San Francisco to the Niners, and they were a dog against the Raiders. So a couple of weeks in a row now they've been a dog. But what have you heard here? This number's moved up in Miami's favor.
Yeah, so the Superbook opened 3 and is still sitting 3 at this point. But if I'm looking at this right, just double checking. Miami's sitting -3, and to your point, the Chargers again, a dog on their home field, no less. And that's even with Miami having gone to San Francisco and lost on Sunday in NFL Week 13. The Dolphins had a 5-game straight up winning streak. They were looking pretty good and kind of trending in a couple of different markets, some of the futures markets and stuff as well. What Casey said out of the gate on this was pretty good two-way right out of the gate, including a couple of 5-figure bets they took on the Dolphins -3. But he said they also saw some sharp money on the home dog Chargers, so they went to 3. Chargers +3 -120. Put a little bit of a premium on that. This morning, as I look at it, it's back to just 3 flat on this game. But so some sharp money, some big bets, just kind of big bets early on coming in on Miami, and a little bit of sharp play coming on the Chargers. He added he thinks both sides are going to see a lot of love during the week. I know when talking with John Murray yesterday, he said Miami's become very much a public team. People liking what Tua Tagovailoa and all of them are doing. Casey, getting back to Casey, said, I think we'll be rooting for the Chargers come Sunday. So the total has been open at 51. It's been one-way traffic on the over in this game. And although it did not move on Sunday night, they did pop it up a tick this morning. It's up to 52 now. So people expecting some scoring in that game as well.
Yeah, the Dolphins, they're 2 touchdowns were on long bombs, a 75-yard one out of the gate, and then Tua hit Tyreek Hill for another touchdown. So really not a lot of sustained scoring drives for the Dolphins. And again, the Chargers defense isn't exactly the San Francisco defense that they're facing coming up on Sunday. But, you have a big quarterback battle with Herbert against Tua Tagovailoa. So we'll see how that one goes. Now, going to the Monday night game, Patrick, Patriots and the Cardinals, they meet up in Arizona. We get the Cardinals on prime time again. Thankfully, we have to see them. How many times have you seen the Cardinals? I mean, I feel like the Cardinals, the Broncos, the
yes.
Colts, like, can we stop putting these teams on? But New England laying 1.5. They have a little extra rest. I talked about Buffalo with the extra rest. New England played last Thursday. Now they get an extra day with the Monday game.
Right.
Going out to the desert here. Belichick's team a little desperate, and they're in last place in the AFC East. They got to win some games. They want to get in the playoffs. Arizona's kind of shot. But what do you have here with New England, a short favorite on the road?
Right, and I was going to make that point on the last game too, on that on the Dolphins Chargers game, and they flexed out the Chiefs and the Broncos. Thank God for that. They flexed the Chiefs Broncos out of that and put the Dolphins Chargers in. So, and I think we'll all be relieved by that come next Sunday night that we're not watching Denver score 8 points again behind Russell Wilson. That team is just baffling. I can't even fathom it. But yes. Not a particularly good Monday night game either, but again, prime time. So we gotta give it a go. And certainly there'll be a lot of people betting it since it's in prime time. So this opened at Pick'em at the Superbook, which it didn't surprise me much, but I kind of thought they might lean Arizona. Just you saw that little meltdown with Mac Jones from the Thursday night game against the Bills, and maybe thinking there's a little discord there, and now you've got a really long road trip and so forth. But they open at Pick. And again, Casey Degnan behind the counter of the Superbook said respected money came in on the Pats at Pick pretty quickly. They moved New England to a small road favorite at -1. He said tickets are about split, but they've taken more money on New England. And it's still at 1 as I look at it this morning. They haven't moved off of that. But the initial opener of Pick goes to Patriots -1 on the road. Totally said has seen some decent action on both sides out of the gate. The opener was 43.5. But there's been a shift this morning. Again, Casey's comments coming on Sunday night. It looks like they're starting to get a push on the over a little bit more, or at least the market's going that way, which is with a total going up to 45. So just overnight, the total from 43.5 to 45, up 1.5 points.
I got to bring it up just because you brought it up, Patrick. How in the world can you make an argument for the Broncos to go over at this point? They're 11-1 to the under this year, and this total at 42.5. Yes, we know Kansas City can score at will, but at the same time, Denver puts up 9 against Baltimore, had a shot to win. I feel like they've had several good shots to win, and they just can't hold it. They can't score. The defense has been great. The offense has done nothing, but can you just ride the unders on the Broncos until they prove otherwise?
Well, you probably should, and I'm sure some people have, and I wish I had. I wish I jumped on that gravy train. I think it's something like 11-1 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's unreal.
It was the Raider game at the beginning, or the game in Vegas was the only one that went over.
Yep. And I don't think that was over by much. But yeah, it's just I hope people are riding that train. If Denver's playing, the under's probably coming in. The Broncos aren't going to score. The Broncos are the Beavis of the NFL. They're never going to score. We're never going to score. Yeah, and I in this case, it's probably a little iffy because the Chiefs can put up some points, but look, with the way the Broncos are playing, the Chiefs are going to have to put up 31 or more to for that total to go over, maybe 35. Who knows? Denver just can't score. It's really baffling. But if you're betting on Broncos unders, well, you're not baffled at all. You're just counting your money every week. So I'm just, week after week, I think I can't be surprised more. I think you and I mentioned this last week. Maybe you pointed it out. But if the Broncos in regulation had scored exactly 18 points in every single game, they would have only 1 loss this season. I mean, that's how good that defense is. That defense is spectacular. And that's after trading away Bradley Chubb. So, they were, and that guy's really good. So it's still a phenomenal defense and getting no reward whatsoever week after week after week with these games where they're scoring 9 points, 10 points. I think they scored 11 against the Niners to get a very ugly win. you got to think the defense is getting sick of it. And it did sound like there was some discord in the Broncos camp last week, some chirping coming out, social media and so forth. But I can't make heads or tails of it, but I just wish, I hope a lot of people were on that under bandwagon, and I wish I'd jumped on as well. It's crazy how consistent it's been.
I want to just jump back really quick before we let you go, Patrick. I want to jump back to college football. The other bowls, there's other 50 bowls, whatever. I mean, there's so many bowls out there. Anything that you're hearing, any quick moves? I mean, look, I know right now nothing's going to change until we find out so-and-so is not going to play. So-and-so is not going to play. This coach is going to leave. Now we're starting to get the coaches movement a little bit in some of, like Louisville and Cincinnati. Scott Satterfield leaving Louisville to go to Cincinnati. They're playing each other in the Fenway Bowl. So he just like switch. I know he's not going to coach the game. These guys don't coach, but he has intel on that team. But anything now, if you wanted to bet on the other bowl games or just wait, when's the best time they say to kind of jump on those games?
Gosh, it's a really good question. I mean, I'm sure that there are, the sharp guys are always looking for holes, and where you're going to find, with college and NFL, especially NFL, the numbers are so tight, but college is so fluid right now, especially with, as you noted, players deciding whether they're actually going to want to play in these lesser lights type of games, players who can't play in these lesser light types of games. Obviously, no Hendon Hooker for Tennessee in that Clemson-Tennessee matchup. The Kansas State-Alabama game looks interesting, at least. That looks like it could be a fun one to watch if Kansas State can be as entertaining as it was against TCU. But Alabama's going to be I'm sure is laying a healthy number there. I haven't looked at it this morning yet. But, I would say unless you feel real comfortable with who's going to be around, you're better off waiting just to make sure. But if you feel comfortable, you might find a slot here, like maybe somebody for Alabama that they think is going to play in a week and a half is going to opt out, and you can jump on Kansas State now and get a much better number. So there are certainly opportunities here, but you've got to keep your ears and eyes peeled for some of that information, because it gets crazy this time of year with players opting in and opting out and going to the draft. And as you said, coaches doing the same thing, moving around. That's totally wild with the Louisville-Cincinnati game.
Now, I did see Alabama's laying 5 right now against Kansas State. And then you go back to motivation, because
exactly.
Obviously, Patrick, this is the biggest game for K-State. I mean, yes, you won the Big 12 against TCU. Now you got your shot against Alabama, and Alabama's got two ways of looking at this. Number one, we got screwed out of the college football playoff. Let's show everyone we belong. Or B, forget it. We're checking out. Like we don't want to be in this game. This means we've played in such bigger games before. That's where sometimes the numbers, I'm not saying the point spread, but like the stats and all that, you can kind of throw out and say, where is the motivation? And that's what makes the bowl games a bit tough to judge the motivation with some of these teams.
Oh, I totally agree. There's definitely going to be different motivations, no matter who's playing or who's coaching or what have you. Alabama is disappointed that it didn't make the playoffs. Saban was trying to make the case on Saturday as things were evolving over the course of the weekend after the USC loss, and then TCU loses. He's trying to make his case. While Kansas State, hey, they're the Big 12 champs. I mean, they're riding high right now. So they're certainly motivated, and that's a team that's got a bunch of players that are probably going to want to play. I mean, there's a chance one or two could want to opt out, but to get a chance to play on New Year's Eve against Alabama, that's a tremendous spotlight. So I think the motivations will definitely be there for Kansas State. We'll see what Saban can do to motivate his team, and he's always got a host of guys who are absolutely going to the NFL. And, they're like, well, if we're not playing for a championship, I'm going to get ready to go get my paycheck instead. I'm not going to risk, I'm not going to go out on New Year's Eve and risk anything happening that's going to hinder my ability to make to be drafted highly and make a bunch of money at the next level. So I think Kansas State will probably be pretty motivated for that game. I'd sit around though. I don't know if I'd only want 4.5 against Alabama there. I think I'd want a little bit more. It's almost like some of this is already being filtered into to the odds makers' point of view here.
Yeah, it should be interesting how those games develop, and you have the games after Christmas. Yeah, it's just you almost have like 3 portions of games: the pre-Christmas games, which are not great. Then that week of going to New Year's Eve, and then you got the big boys in the on New Year's Eve on that Saturday with the 2 semifinal games and a few sprinkled in before you get to the national championship. Patrick Everson, you could find him on Twitter at @PatrickE_Vegas. Also find his work on Vegas Insider. And Patrick, let everybody know where they could find you, at least your updates on Vegas Insider.
Yeah, well, we've already got an article along with the live stream that you and I just are wrapping up right now. We've got an article to go with it up right now on VegasInsider.com, and that updates all week long. So it's kind of a reverse chronological thing where you're getting updates all week long from multiple books because we've got a lot of great contacts at Vegas Insider behind the counter. So that updates all week long. There is a college football playoff semifinals report already up at VegasInsider.com, and that'll update for the next month, obviously. But some of the information you and I discussed at the top of the show here, some of that information's in there on how some of the early action is and where the early numbers are. There's a little bit of an update on the college football futures market, where the odds makers are at with these 4 teams at these times, who's good for the book, who's bad for the book. I can tell you at BetMGM, which we've had a lot of their numbers up over the course of the live stream today. They are very bad to Michigan, so they're happy to have any of the other 3 teams, even TCU with some long numbers out there. People never really got excited about TCU, so that article's up as well, and it'll update over the course of the next few weeks. And of course, we'll have there's just a plethora of content from a lot of great contributors, including yourself, up on Vegas Insider on all of the NFL activity, all of the college football activity, all the bowl games and everything. So make us your one-stop shop for sure.
Patrick Everson, always great work. He is he's down. He's got the helmet on. He's digging through. He's got the shovel. He's looking for everything, every edge for us. Patrick, we appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next Monday, looking ahead to Week 15.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Have a great week.
All right, you too. That is Patrick Everson. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for listening. And as always, best of luck with your bets.